Hi, so this is another video of recommended books. I started off with the cartoonist ones because I collect cartoonist books, and then music followed it because so much of my life is built around music. But I wanted to get onto the science fiction novels and that kind of stuff, which will be soon. But in the meantime, I thought it'd be nice to kind of bounce off the cartoonist one and do something that's still related to illustration, and that's do 10 graphic novels that I would recommend. So graphic novels are an interesting medium because it's a mix of both storytelling through words and storytelling through pictures. And I know that the term developed from the idea of comic writers writing in a more mature, sort of adult-orientated, serious way, which then made it necessary for a new term to kind of broaden the spectrum of people's perception of what they could expect to get from something that could essentially look like a comic. The graphic novel medium, I think, is a really fascinating thing, and these 10 books cover quite a wide range of things you can do with the medium, from something that looks a bit cartoony that I'm still calling a graphic novel, to the kind of really serious political stuff, which covers a few of the ones I've got in the list as well. So 10 graphic novels. So, not surprisingly, I'm going to start with Alan Moore. So Alan Moore is a massive influence on comic writing and has, since the 80s, been one of the chief factors in people perceiving comics differently. And his most famous book is obviously Watchmen, which I do have down there. It's amazing and I love it. But I love this one more, and that's V for Vendetta. So V for Vendetta, when you hear Alan Moore talk about the book, you can hear him say that he says we a lot, and David Lloyd, the illustrator, did work very collaboratively with him. So it's not just simple as saying Alan Moore wrote it and David Lloyd drew it. There was much more collaborative than that. And Alan Moore says that David Lloyd came up with the idea of V looking like Guy Fawkes, which I think is amazing because obviously that's quite iconic. And obviously since the book and since the film, probably more since the film, that mask has obviously led to Anonymous and all those other uses for the mask, has become iconic in different ways. But as a book, as a graphic novel, it's amazing. The story is based around Alan Moore's frustration with Thatcher's government in the 80s and what he felt was a potential rise of fascism, which is also why it's so relevant at the moment, because there's so many Western governments at the moment that are being sympathetic to fascist ideas, or are they're surreptitiously bringing out fascist kind of elements to what they do. It couldn't be more relevant at the moment. And V as a character is much more developed than just this sort of two-dimensional terrorist, which it could have been written like that and it still would have been interesting. But what makes it fascinating is that it's a grey area. A lot of the characters in this book and a lot of the characters in a lot of Alan Moore's work are grey in their morality. So he's an anti-hero. He's not particularly nice. He's quite cruel. He's unpredictable and always fascinating through the whole story. The point of view character is not V in this. It's Evie, who he meets early on in the story, and it's through her story arc that we kind of discover what's happened in the country and how she has to deal with it and all that kind of stuff. But obviously it's built around his mission to change the world, and what he does, it's a very anarchist book. What he does creates a movement and creates, I won't spoil it, I don't want to put spoilers through, but what he does is a huge statement about what could be done politically in that situation with a sort of fascist government. And it's such a powerful read. And the most amazing moment in the book, I think, is when you discover more there's one, if you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's one kind of part of the book where you find out a key moment of his past, and that's just phenomenal, that bit. and you sort of gasp while you're reading it. The artwork is very evocative, and it really creates a unique atmosphere. I don't think I've seen anything like this in another book, and it tells the story so well. And Alan Moore does this thing where if he's trying to put a lot of backstory in there and kind of set the scene with the political situation, he'll put a lot of text in there, but quite a lot of the time he doesn't use a lot of text, and he lets the pictures tell the story, and that can be really powerful. So this is the new edition, which is been coloured, but I do have most of the original sort of comic form, which were black and white, and I know Alan Moore prefers that, and I do get what he means, because the artwork does come off better in black and white. So V for Vendetta, absolutely phenomenal book, and couldn't recommend it more. And if you like Watchmen but haven't got around to getting this one yet or reading this one yet, it's definitely worth reading. Okay, the second one I'm going to talk about, the reason why I'm talking about this second is because this is a book called It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken, by an artist called Seth. Fascinating book, and the reason why I want to put it second is that with Alan Moore's work kind of redefining what comics could do, I think this is when you start looking at independent graphic novels and how low-key they could be and how personal they can be, and how it's not really literally about superhero stuff, it's about something far more real, and this is literally about an artist who becomes obsessed with looking for a New Yorker artist, some work by him, and it's about how he feels about life, and there's lots of things in there about how he doesn't really connect to society and feels disenfranchised, if you like, or certainly culturally, and it's got lots of those kind of musings around it. It's just a beautiful story, really, about how he feels. And I've seen some documentary stuff with Seth, and it's very, very personal. You can see how he lives in and thinks the way that this character does. So it's a very personal, autobiographical thing. And it's, again, really beautiful imagery with a lot of these kind of novels, and really recommend it. But it's a very low-key story, so don't expect anything too dramatic, but it's a very peaceful experience reading it, and I think it's really good, and it just got like his stuff about his relationships and all that kind of thing. So yeah, an older one, but a real important moment for me when I discovered that. So yeah, Seth. So I just talked about Seth and his book It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken, and this one is a new book. It's only been out for a couple of years, but it's a similar kind of tone, but it's much deeper and much more powerful. I really was hugely impressed by this, and it blew me away, really. It's called Blankets by Craig Thompson. Absolutely phenomenal book. It's a very big book. It's like 700 pages, and again, some really powerful moments in the artwork as well. So like the way he draws, the expressions on the faces really say so much about how they're feeling, which is really cool. And then there's other moments where it's about his relationship, and then there'll be kind of like these kind of composite pages where different elements of the relationship will be kind of summarised quickly with this sort of more sort of collage kind of image, which works really well. And he'll kind of make some really nice imagery of kind of to create that sort of desolate landscape of the small town he lived in, and then also use the pages to kind of put space in the story, which is really cool. So you know, the way it's drawn is absolutely brilliant and really beautiful, you know, because obviously you can contrast what I've just shown you with a more densely written couple of pages. So it's very involved. The characterization is the key in this story, and you really do care for him and on all the characters that are in the story, and it's been raved about. So it's not completely obscure, but it's an absolutely beautiful story. Blankets by Craig Thompson. Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 graphic novels that are much more political. So, I mean, obviously V for Vendetta is very political, but more directly political. So this is an absolutely incredible, beautiful book called The Arrival. It is still a fantasy book, but it's very clearly a metaphorical piece about immigration. So there are literally no words in the book. It's literally just the images, and the artwork is absolutely beautiful. So you get absolutely amazing images like this across 2 pages, double spread. But then you get the storytelling aspects, where you'll have the more sequential panels telling you what's happening. So, you know, this is kind of mixed in, and you've got the sort of fantasy elements. So obviously the actual places themselves look unrealistic and fantasy-like, but the actual characterizations and what happens to the story, to these immigrants in this particular family, are very real. And it's just a beautiful and sensitive and biographical way of talking about, so autobiographical way of talking about immigration. So on these pages here, you can see that he's trying to communicate with people that don't share his language. And it's a fantastic device to do this with no text at all, because you can see that ultimately that's all they've got. They've only got their gestures, and you know, the imagery here is just a beautiful way of communicating that very human problem. I think the thing with this book is the lack of text is probably the most powerful device, besides the beautiful illustrations. It reinforces the need for empathy, and it's definitely a great advert for multiculturalism and accepting different people from different cultures, different backgrounds. So yeah, that is all part of that great quality in this book. It's just absolutely like beautiful. And that the humanity in the story, it really does kind of evoke the feelings of empathy and tolerance. So yeah, The Arrival, beautiful book that has been had a lot of attention for all the right reasons. So yeah, The Arrival, Shaun Tan, absolutely amazing. So as I said, I was going to look at 3 autobiographical political books, and this is called The Best We Could Do by Thi Bui, a Vietnamese writer. It's a fantastic book that goes through many decades of Vietnamese history through the story of her family, so her parents and her grandparents, and her. So what's interesting about this one is because she's a child remembering what it was like, the experiences are different from the next one I'm going to talk about, for example, where it's a reporter reporting on a place. This is from a child's point of view, so a lot of the worst stories in the book, the stories about violence and about the French occupation in Vietnam and that kind of thing, that's all done through what she's heard rather than what she's experienced. So it's a different kind of tone, but it really is massively educational and very powerful to read, and it's very beautiful as well. So it's because she's now living in America, and you know, I don't think it's going to spoil anything by saying that she's writing from that perspective. It's a very beautiful story as well. So Joe Sacco's book Palestine, you can probably imagine that this is a book that explores the Israeli occupation of Palestine. It's from the point of view of an American reporter going over there to discover for himself what the situation was like, and it's just really powerful. It's really upsetting. It's brutal. The book is filled with stories of the Palestinian experience, but the experiences are absolutely shocking. There's a couple of key moments in it. Some of the prisoner stuff is really hard to read, and just this basically the overall impression you get is how dehumanized the Palestinians were. So the whole dehumanizing of the Palestinians, I think, is a really important message running through the book. So yeah, it's a really powerful book from that point of view. The next one I want to talk about is absolutely unique. It's an incredible book. And just to say how unique it is, I haven't seen it described as a graphic novel as much as it being described as narrative art. And it's just a beautiful book. It's a fantastic story. So there's no doubt about that. It's not just about the art, but literally both elements, the artwork and the story, are just phenomenal, and it really played on my mind for days after reading it. So you've got sort of these huge. He's kind of known now for these big landscape paintings that he puts in these books, and you've got this text on the side that continues the story. It's about a little girl and her robot, and they go on this long journey, and within that journey you find you slowly discover what the world is becoming, this kind of a post-apocalyptic kind of landscape. You've got these sort of remnants of the society that's kind of left behind while they're driving around. But as you're reading it, it becomes clear what happened. This image here is that virtual reality link, which is part of the overall story as well, and it's definitely right at the beginning of the story. It's a clue to some of the issues within the book, but I'm trying not to spoil it by saying anything about the plot. But honestly, it really does pack a punch. It's a beautiful book, but it's quite a desolate book, as you can see from those landscapes, and it's a very small story about these two, but with a big story around it, a big kind of setting around it. The electric state, amazing. So the next one I'm going to talk about is based on Richard Matheson's novel I Am Legend, a classic that's been put into school curriculums and that kind of stuff. There's no doubt of the impact of the novel, and obviously George Romero has said that that's where the Romero zombies come from. Hugely influential book, and it is one of my favourite books anyway. But it frustrates me that there's been 4 films made apparently based on the book, and none of them are like the book at all. I mean, they're a bit like them. The one that's closest is the Charlton Heston one, the Omega Man. The latest one, the Will Smith one, I Am Legend, is it got such a different tone that might as well be a different story. But go back 30 years, and I started buying these, which are Steve Niles' interpretation of the novel, and they are amazing, and they are literally like the book. So you've got really, really good artwork, very evocative and interesting, almost impressionistic artwork that goes with the story. And Neville is like he is in the book in this interpretation, and it's such a great book that I don't understand why they changed it. And that's a huge haunting part of the whole book, him getting called out every night. They're trying to get him out of the house so they can kill him. Neville, they keep shouting Neville, and it's just these 4, it came in 4 parts when it first came out like this, and now you can get it as a trade paperback, so you can get it like that, the whole thing, and it's just fantastic. So if you like graphic novels and you like graphic novels of novels, then this is just such a brilliant example of that. So Richard Matheson, I Am Legend, reinterpreted by Steve Niles. Steve Niles is probably most famous for 30 Days of Night, which is phenomenal. But this is just a fantastic version of I Am Legend, which, again, is just such a brilliant book. So yeah, Richard Matheson actually been given some faithful adaptation for a change. So a good one to follow up from I Am Legend by Richard Matheson would be another one indirectly influenced by I Am Legend, because it's so influenced by George Romero's zombies, and that is, of course, The Walking Dead by Robert Kirkman. So there are tons and tons of these. Obviously, this is volume 1, and you can get them in different kind of trade paperback compendiums and things, but I quite like getting them as these smaller ones, and you know, massively expressive artwork again. You know, very brilliant storytelling. The characters are awesome. There are differences between the TV show and the graphic novels, so I think it's quite good to sort of take them one at a time, I think, really. But having said that, lots of people like comparing, like watching them together and comparing. So there are moments in the show when it'll play with the audience expectations because they've read the books. So that's quite clever. So you could watch the show and read the graphic novels as well at the same time. But yeah, fantastic storytelling. I absolutely love the story. I love the characters. I think it's just a great example of modern horror in this medium done really well, where you really care about the characters. So, The Walking Dead. Okay, the last one could be argued I'm stretching the point about what is a graphic novel, but I'm not sure. I felt like I should include this. So this is the Rime of the Ancient Mariner as reinterpreted by Hunt Emerson. So even though he's definitely a cartoonist and his artwork is definitely more in the cartoon tradition than illustration, I still think that it ticks a lot of the other boxes about graphic novels because it's an interpretation of a classic piece of literature. I don't know if you know the poem. It's one of my favourite poems as well, which is another reason why it's in this list. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love how he draws. I could, you know, anything that Hunt Emerson drew would be worth having anyway. So yeah, it shows the story well. Yeah, he's great at doing kind of. He's great at drawing more sort of ethereal kind of supernatural stuff as well, and that works really well. And you know, if you know the poem, then it gets really epic. What happens to the crew on the ship, and that's depicted really well in the book. So, yeah, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, another great example of Hunt Emerson's artwork. So, there you are. Okay, so that's 10 graphic novels I'd recommend. There are so many graphic novels out there, and so many crossovers with comics and that kind of thing that. You could have done a whole different list of 10 other ones, but those are the ones I personally chose because they've had the most impact on me personally. Yeah, so lots there as far as like some of the political autobiographical stuff is really cool, and some of the fantasy stuff in there. And also I think, you know, there are some good interpretations of classic novels as well, classic literature. And obviously it's all about the great artwork, and the 10 examples I gave, I think, have got really fantastic artwork in them. Thanks a lot.